Welcome back. And you thought the spring municipal election in Sarasota would be boring. Shame on you. It's a nonpartisan race, but in reality, you have two Democrats, Jennifer Ahern Koch and Hagen Brody, and one Republican, Martin Hyde. But it's a lot more complicated than that. Three candidates running for two seats in a city that leans Democrat. But in this case, the two Democrats are waging their own little skirmish over which other, through surrogates, and the community group STOP, which wants to control development. As for the Republican, Martin Hyde, he is giving his own party headaches with stories like the one in the Herald Tribune today, raising questions about his temper and his temperament. Joining us is Jack BRILL, the Vice Chairman of the Republican Party of Sarasota, Kevin Griffith, the Vice Chairman of the Sarasota County Democratic Party, and former Sarasota Mayor Kelly Kirshner, who is probably glad he is not running, but is the perfect person to help us understand all the plots and subplots in this election. Kevin, let me start with you because you saw what Gabriel was saying in Kate's story there, and for somebody who is the vice chair of the party, I would imagine it's awfully frustrating that in an election like this, you would like to see both Democrats go on and take both seats. It doesn't help when they're fighting with each other like this.
And you know, the irony of all this is that Jennifer Ahern Koch and Hagen Brody actually get along, and they agree with each other on more than they don't. I want to make it perfectly clear to your viewers. Both STOP, which is an organization, and Gabriel Hammett do not speak for the Sarasota Democratic Party. The Democratic Party of Sarasota endorses Hagen Brody and Jennifer Ahern Koch for the City of Sarasota election. The reason they hadn't endorsed prior to today is because our DEC has a meeting once a month, and they hadn't yet met, but they're meeting as we speak, and they will both be endorsed. So we endorse both candidates.
But as a matter of party discipline, this is not good.
Well, I think what's not good is what's coming from the Republican side. And if you look today, what was a very substantive debate on what you heard earlier about development has now turned into Trump-style hate speech. I mean, if you look at what Jack's party put on their Facebook page and the comments that are linked to it pointed directly at Jennifer Ahern Koch, it's totally inappropriate and it has no place in the city of Sarasota.
Hold on one second. First, let's tell people we're referring to. Jennifer Ahern Koch is on the video talking about sanctuary cities, which is something that is big in the news right now. And obviously, the Republican Party is helping disseminate that in hopes of what, Jack?
Well, Jennifer Ahern Koch, she put on a video which has now been seen by 47,000 people and 21,000 or 27,000 views in 24 hours. She is advocating that we have Sarasota become a sanctuary city, which is probably the largest campaign conversation to have. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, we don't want criminal, illegal aliens in the city of Sarasota or Sarasota County.
Let's have our own version of PolitiFact here, and we'll ask Jack to I think all of us should observe, truthful, honest conversation. There is no video that Jennifer Ahern Koch made that is supporting sanctuary cities. A question was asked at a forum, and then it appears that that video has been spliced together to somehow suggest that she's supporting this, which I would agree with Kevin, goes back to, you said, shame on the voters. Well, no, not shame on the voters, shame on whoever's participating in these games, and there's probably some games on a couple sides here, but this one is at its worst. It's going back to let's create this narrative about immigrants or somehow the boogeyman in a city election, and it's completely ridiculous. When we talk about a sanctuary city, if you want to know who's in charge, it's the sheriff. It's who runs the jail, and that's who's going to decide who gets deported or not. So let's stop the bogus conversation.
Hold on just one second. Kelly, that may be true. But in terms of public opinion these days, despite what the federal courts are doing in terms of the Trump administration, there have been so many stories about tragedies and violence, on occasion with illegal immigrants around the country. Many people do not want their local communities to be labeled sanctuary.
Well, exactly, and that's clearly what Kevin was referring to, that the Republican Party understands that sentiment. This is not a position of Jennifer Ahern Koch's. It was a question that was asked. I think her response was something in effect, I don't even really know. This is not an issue that is coming before the city that I know of. And now somehow that's been spliced together in a manipulated video to somehow suggest that she's supporting it. And it's blatantly wrong. And shame on whoever is doing this to put that narrative out there.
I can tell you, nobody from the Republican Party has spliced everything together.
Well, that's great.
What is said in the question that was done at the New College Forum, and she was asked if she would support sanctuary cities, and she said, I would support sanctuary cities and Sarasota becoming a sanctuary city. And we're not talking about, we're talking about criminal illegal aliens, and to your point, since 2009, we've had 460 criminal illegal aliens that have been rearrested, have been sent to Miami by Sheriff Knight's office, and have been sent back to 17 different countries. That's just since 2009.
You are aware that New College has been pushing to be a sanctuary campus.
I am very aware of New Colleges, yes.
Alan, here's the problem. This is an entirely made-up issue by the Republican Party and the Republican leadership.
Kevin, it is not a made-up issue.
Here's the problem.
She's on video.
And here's the problem.
And it's the largest issue there is in the race right now.
On the comments section of the Facebook page, they use phrases like rape, a word that you wouldn't want your daughter to be called. And the Republican Party of Sarasota has brought this to Sarasota and says, please reshare, please vote November 9th or May 9th for our candidate, instead of condemning it.
November election.
And so I'm calling on Jack and the party today to denounce that type of rhetoric on their own Facebook page.
Comments that are made by individuals are not anything that we support.
Those are the
freedom of speech.
Remove them.
Well, we'll have to, if they're that bad, we'll have to look at it.
Because the people of Sarasota do not want Trump-style politics in our city hall.
But people in Sarasota want a safe city, and they don't want criminal illegal aliens.
I would also appeal to ABC 7, again on the shame topic. Can we talk about city issues? Because that's what voters really care about. I don't think they want to talk about sanctuary cities. I think the voter is smart enough to know that that is a ridiculous boogeyman to somehow drive a wedge.
But you're getting your point.
Jack, is that really an issue for Sarasota right now?
It is a very much of an issue because it affects every aspect of the city.
There are a lot of issues going on with this campaign, some Democratic only. There are a couple involving the Republican candidate also, and we will get to that. We are just getting started. We'll pick up the discussion right after we check the weather. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing Sarasota City Commission race. The runoff election is less than 2 weeks away, and while it is a nonpartisan race, the candidates are receiving support and backlash from the local parties. Our guests tonight are Jack BRILL of the Republican Party of Sarasota, Kevin Griffith of the Sarasota County Democratic Party, and Kelly Kirshner, a former mayor and city commissioner in the city. And Jack, let me start with you because we talked about the Democratic side a little bit, and the Republican candidate is Martin Hyde, and on the front page of the paper today is a major story about his temper and his temperament, the give and take in his divorce, and some incidents and run-ins with the police department. Obviously, that's not helpful.
I will say one thing I can say very confidently about Martin Hyde. He is not a church mouse, nor is he a very quiet individual. He's very outspoken, very intelligent, but very outspoken, and does not like to lose in a conversation. I read the same article, don't know the facts. I do know his one ex-wife, Jane, has been working on his campaign since he announced, and I hope that in the heat of a divorce, a lot of things get thrown around to get a settlement. I hope that's all there was.
But there were other incidents involving the police, and Martin is quoted in the paper, and we all know him pretty well, that he is somebody who is not afraid to say what he feels, and sometimes it may be over the top. But obviously, this is coming from somewhere. Where do you think it's emanating from?
Well, I think, I guess I'll throw it back that the campaigns of our Democratic counterparts, that they're obviously looking for all opposition research to try and finish him off because he's a threat for them and their candidacies.
Kelly, let me go to you because you're the person who you're involved, but you have some distance now in terms of city politics. It may be very difficult for people at home to follow all this because this is not just R versus D. This is a lot of different factions, whether it's community groups like STOP to neighborhood groups. Have these groups always been involved in this way in city commission races?
The parties have not really always been involved, and this is a nonpartisan race, and so it's really unfortunate. I think the founding fathers, if you will, of the city probably always envisioned the problems of partisan politics locally. And so Lou Ann Palmer, that was a long time serving mayor here, her quote was always, you know, potholes and zoning code have nothing to do with being a Republican or a Democrat. And so frankly, when I was on the commission, and Kevin can attest to this, I would frequently have conversations with Kevin, with Rita Ferrandino and other party representatives. Please don't get into it. What it does is it results in these types of things of creating really garbage arguments about immigration or maybe someone's background and his run-ins with police or whatever else, and we don't talk about the issues, which is what's going on in this show right now, Alan.
Right, but we also know that in communities not only in Sarasota but around Florida, a lot of these city commission council races are technically nonpartisan, but these days the parties are very involved with that. What the point I really want to get to is the role of these other outside organizations and neighborhood committees and their influence on the process, because obviously they are taking different sides even among Democratic candidates.
There is, and that goes to my point exactly. The parties really have nothing to do with the orientation of how someone votes. We're not voting on abortion or immigration at the city commission table. What we're voting on is zoning codes and thoughtfulness in how our city develops. And so what it boils down to is, are you really pro-rational development that engages citizens and neighborhoods, or are you really pro-development? And then maybe from there you have conversations on do we need a really large police force that's the single largest budget expenditure of the city at $31 million. And they're, frankly, I mean, that's probably what we should be talking about more than anything, is a $31 million annual expenditure. How do these candidates feel about that? The associated commitments and liabilities we have for pensions with that. And that is, if taxpayers want to have a conversation about what's important on the city commission, that's what we should be talking about tonight, not all this other ridiculous stuff.
So let's take,
pensions are a wonderful thing to talk about.
So let's take this issue here. It seems overwhelmingly that the commission campaign here is about whether, to what degree you control development. It's something that people in Sarasota continually struggle with. Kevin, do you think that is the #1 issue that this race gets down to?
Well, a couple things. One, I want to push back a little bit that there's a division in the Democratic Party. There's also a division in the Republican Party. I mean, the group STOP and those neighborhood organizations are made up of people who are also registered Republicans who are not supporting the Republican in this race. So it's not fair to say that there's a division only among Democrats. In fact, the Democrats are united. Going back to what the actual issues are.
Well, they're not quite united, because obviously Gabriel Hammond is technically
but Gabriel
a Democrat.
Hammond doesn't represent anyone but Gabriel Hammond. He doesn't even live in the city. Okay. STOP is made up of people who live in the city, and again, they are a bipartisan group. But let me return to this.
Not very bipartisan, but
they're very, I think most of their leadership, Jack, is actually registered Republicans. So.
I was reading an article this week about Austin, Texas, which is a growing, thriving community, larger city than ours. They took a poll of what the important issues were in the city of Austin. Guess what they were? Traffic, affordable housing, jobs. I mean, it's not just an issue here in Sarasota, it's an issue all across the country in communities that are growing. And it's something that, one, our Democratic Party candidates agree on. They agree on those issues, whereas the Republican Party sees immigration as an important issue for the city of Sarasota.
But let me, we have less than a minute left. We're talking about development #1 and traffic as the major issues. There is also an incredible story over a problem with the books, in millions of dollars in terms of the pension plan, that there were errors in terms of the accounting. Why aren't we hearing that more?
Well, and that's something that the current commission and the Democratic candidates haven't talked about. We have a $150 million pension deficit in the city, and based on $15 million a year going in and $36 million a year going out, the pensions, they're all gone by 2034. So what are you going to tell the current police officers and the general employees? Oh, by the way, we're going to give you a pension, but it may not be here in a few years.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, if they're still talking to each other, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, opioid addiction on the Suncoast. There are 3 candidates vying for 2 seats on the Sarasota City Commission. Will money and campaigning on the part of the local Republicans and Democrats affect the outcome? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So, Kelly, what's your view? Are you frustrated that the parties seem to be as involved at this stage?
I think it's mutually assured destruction by both parties to get in the race. It doesn't help, and I appreciate the role that Kevin's playing, at least trying to call some sanity to our colleagues in the Republican side. And I'm really happy to hear what Jack's saying about the importance of pension issues. And I hope, Jack, that you will put up on your Facebook page now, and let's have a focus on the issues and pull out this stuff that we can leave to national politics, but at a local level, I think we owe it to Republicans, Democrats, Independents, much better conversations than what is on that page right now.
And we also owe it to all citizens of Sarasota, the 38,000 registered voters, to make sure that they know all the positions of all the candidates. And by the way, just to your point, you know, Joe sent letters for 3 different city race cycles to stay. Joe Girders, our chairman, to stay out if Rita would stay out and Christina would stay out, and they all said no. So this cycle, we said, well, we've stayed out before. We're getting involved this time.
Kevin, I think you probably have something to say to that.
Well, Alan, tomorrow's the NFL draft, and I think the Republican Party of Sarasota has thrown its Hail Mary pass in this race because they saw that on the issues their candidate wasn't going to win. And the Democratic Party is not going to sit idly by. We will get our voters out, and Jennifer Ahern Koch and Hagen Brody are going to be the next city commissioners.
The question that I have is, given some of the back and forth between at least surrogates representing both Hagen and Jen, are you concerned that voters may be turned off and may be trying, want to try something new?
I hope they aren't, because again, if you talk to the candidates themselves, if you talk to Hagen and Jen, first of all, they get along very well. They want to work with each other. They're campaigning together.
And I'm not sure, Alan, I've seen that. I'm not sure what you're referring to. If you're talking about the gentleman who lives in Venice who's not a city voter that you keep putting on air, he's not a surrogate for either one of those individuals. I'm not sure what you're referencing between that divide. I see a lot of alignment between both campaigns, and as Kevin said at the top of the show, there is much more agreement than disagreement.
Right. We will have to leave it there, and we could go on, and we will have all the candidates in for a debate soon. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, opioid addiction. Since the start of the year, there have been more than 70 overdoses in Sarasota County. 14 were fatal. While the epidemic is being tackled by multiple agencies, including law enforcement, addiction recovery centers, and more, the number of overdoses continues to rise, and we ask you what you think should be done to help. Carol Easton writes, just try to help the people get off this drug and stop the deaths. Free treatment, people. An addict does not have the money it costs to get treatment, and their families don't either. If you truly want to do this, have compassion and more open, free treatment centers. Abigail Gonzalez writes, it is unbelievable how hard it is to get drug treatment without insurance or money to pay for it. And Mary Della Valley writes, whatever happened to not starting opioids to begin with? Well, what do you think about the plots and subplots in the Sarasota County Commission race, or the Sarasota City Commission race? Just join the conversation on our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Jack BRILL is Vice Chair of the Republican Party of Sarasota. Kevin Griffith is the Vice Chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. And Kelly Kirshner is a former Sarasota Mayor and City Commissioner.